So there's a video going around of Alex Hormozi showing his work setup in his Las Vegas office for acquisition.com. And basically it looked like this. He had no windows. In fact, he actively advised against having any natural light or anything to look at. He had kind of noise canceling headphones on without any music, which is probably a good thing. His music could be distracting, but he had the headphones on without any music, and he had a full suite of objects that were only related to work, and his entire vicinity had nothing that could be used for anything other than work. So it was essentially just computer stuff, sheets of paper, and nothing. And this is this place, this is the space where he would lock himself for 14 to 16 hours and work at a time, at least according to his own work estimates. So the question arises, and this is a big debate in the comments, and this is one that I find really important to me because it's one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, is that should you work in this hyper-optimized, totally just controlled environment where you only think about work metrics, you only think about optimizing very hard statistics, and you completely ignore quote-unquote feelings, emotions, motivation, and you just push through work? Or should you work in a bit more of a free, flexible way when you feel like it, just when you want to work, as long as the work gets done? And I'm going to approach this both from the perspective of somebody who actually is trying to accomplish as much as possible, get very rich, be very successful, whatever your metric or definition of success is. And secondly, just from a little bit more of the moral perspective of, is it right to push yourself that hard for something, and is it quote-unquote worth it? So first of all, I'd like to say that I've tried both. I've done both, and I will immediately point out my bias and my inclination, which is, being represented all around me right here. Not that this is work, but I'm here in natural light. I'm here by a waterfall. It's probably fucking up my audio entirely right now. And I'm here in the sunlight. And I love being out in the sunlight. I love seeing things. I love walking in nature. I'm a bit of an antisocial person at times. I like talking to people, but I don't do it that often. I would hate to lock myself in a room with nothing to do but work, without any natural light, just smashing away at the computer with, full medical lighting overhead and with no noise, just noise canceling headphones on. But I've done it. I did it for about, I don't think I've done it for longer than maybe 3 months at a time. 3 months at a time. And usually no more than 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day maybe. And this is for a few different things. This is both when I was actively trying to build my businesses, and this is also just when I had any personal work to do. By personal work, I'm referring to planning, thinking, making decisions about important life directions for me. I would take on this advice because I thought that it would make me a little bit more productive. I thought that it was the right thing to do. And now I have a different answer after having tried both ways. And of course, naturally, most of the time I gravitate towards working in a bit more of a flexible environment. If I can get through and skate by on my kind of meta goals for a quarter or a season or even an entire year with 2 to 3 hours of work a day, I'm not going to push it and work 16. That's my personal kind of inclination. And this is a big difference that I'll point out here shortly. So I think the first thing that you need to point out if you're trying to make this decision for yourself, or if you're just trying to make sense of what the fuck is going on, when you see Alex Hormozi, and you see lots of people defending him in the comments of this video, lots of people who can see what he's doing and want to believe very badly that that is the way to success because that is what he's shown them, and especially this goes for people that are very stuck as fans of him, that would be very, that would feel wrong criticizing anything that he does. You have to realize Alex Hormozi's background. I've watched a lot of Alex Hormozi. I have probably watched about the same amount as every other fan, but as somebody who doesn't agree with everything he says, boy, I've watched a fuck ton of Alex Hormozi. I've watched all of his Chris Williamson Modern Wisdom stuff because, by the way, if you're an Alex Hormozi fan and you want to hear more about his stuff in depth, of course he talks about it in his own videos, but Chris pulls a lot out of him that you wouldn't otherwise hear. There's like nearly 20 hours of content with Modern Wisdom and Alex Hormozi. I would highly recommend checking those out. I got a lot out of them. But You hear a lot about his background, about his story, about how he grew up, about his family, about his parents. And basically, Alex Hormozi only ever had his dad when he was growing up. And if you hear, he had actually quite an emotional upbringing because his childhood wasn't fantastic, and especially his relationship with his father was not great. So he spent a lot of his early years in business, and this is not something I'm estimating, this is something he's completely said. His goal was his first few years, and this energy may be sustained as far as his first decade in business, that his goal was simply to prove his father wrong. Of course, he wanted to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. But his energy, his fucking brute force method, absolutely spawned from a place of anger and, frankly, kind of a lack of control. Not necessarily from a place of hyper-optimization and intellect of, I am going to do this the best possible way. It was kind of just a result of his natural, emotional state and his natural, he hates the word psychology and spiritual, but I think those arise from his spiritual state as well. Not spiritual as in it was damaged or broken, I just mean his natural inclination and kind of direction as a person, which is not good or bad, because we need angry, violent people who can get shit done and lock themselves in a room and work for 16 hours in a day. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a totally valid and very useful type of person applied correctly. And of course, he's applied it very well. Net worth is not the only important thing, but I think Alex Hormozi's net worth as of right now is probably in the 300 to 200 million, I don't know. He was the 100 million guy a few years ago, so I assume he's probably gone up since then. I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. But Alex Hormozi had that type of upbringing, and I think that is the big X factor that you have to consider when you look at how he approaches work and how he approaches all these things. Because that kind of is natural for him, and he fully admits that he did this from a place of anger and spite when he was working. You could argue if that's healthy or not. In fact, I will directly argue that long term that it's not healthy. And my definition of healthy is sustainable and productive, meaning efficient. And Alex Hormozi, for a guy who talks a lot about efficiency, works in a way that for a lot of people long term is really not going to be efficient. It's not going to be the fastest way. It's not even going to be the most, it's not going to be the most efficient way, but it's not even going to be the fastest way, is what I meant to say. It's not even going to be the way that gets you to your goals the quickest, but boy, will it sure be the most miserable, depending on your personality type. And for Alex Hormozi, I've heard a little bit more from him, especially on Chris Williamson podcast, and according to himself, he doesn't really, and I forget which episode this is in, I don't want to quote it because I don't know which one it was, there were like 6 of them. According to Alex himself, he doesn't actually push that hard. This is in his own words. He says, everyone thinks I'm this Alex Hormozi type guy or something, that I do the work until your eyes bleed thing and push myself to my absolute limits. But honestly, most of the time, I just really don't push that hard. I just do what I want to do. And I think that's the crucial thing. Alex is simply doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. He is not interested in optimizing for things that he doesn't care about. He's not, and for example, I'll bring up his entire market, or not his market, but his kind of brand here, and the way he markets himself. He doesn't need anything other than business. He doesn't really want anything other than business. And I think that he markets himself that way, both intentionally, but also it's just who he is, so it fits very well for his brand and for his own benefit. And by the way, I have nothing wrong with that. I think building a personal brand, you have to make decisions about who you are. You can't just yap all willy-nilly about whatever you want at any given time without any consideration to how it fits into the image that you've built over several years, especially when your entire business hinges on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's always been a concept, even in the whole fucking 20th century, and this is just something I've read and heard, is that it was very normal for there to be a concept of your public self and your private self, to your family, to your children, to your wife, etc., as opposed to the person that you demonstrate and present to people in your workplace, in public events, whatever, right? Obviously that distinction looks very different now with social media, with technology, with the fucking internet. Everything is all over the place, and there's potential for things to mix in ways that maybe they shouldn't. But Alex Hormozi does what he wants to do, and I think that's the big thing that a lot of people don't understand, and don't dig themselves into a hole thinking that what Alex Hormozi is saying is what's right, and that's the way you should work, and that is how real disciplined winners work. And you have to push yourself to do things you don't want to do. Now, don't get me wrong, you do need to push yourself to do things you don't want to do. And this ties into a kind of unrelated, it's related, but an argument that is a debate that is not for today, and that is discipline versus motivation. Should you be using willpower, or should you feel driven and fuck it, I'm ready to go when you work? Very, very loaded argument in there. And I think that it's related to this whole concept with Alex Hormozi, but I'm not going to get into it today. For the record, I think motivation is better than discipline. There's some other videos about that. But Alex Hormozi has a big personality shift from what is average naturally. Not because he pushed him. I mean, he does obviously work very hard. I'm just saying that he naturally works that way, and that is genuinely the most productive way for him. Very likely. He's probably tried other ways. He's probably tried the hyper efficient, the Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week shit, where you build a $100 million business with 4 hours of effort a week. Polar opposite of the way Alex Hormozi suggests going around doing business. Alex Hormozi suggests that brute force, raw volume, input is the only way. He doesn't necessarily explicitly say that, and but I think it's the biggest thing that a lot of people need to realize is that when Alex Hormozi points out the way he normally works, it is not the ideal way for everyone, and he is only describing his own experience. The big problem is not that he's explicitly telling everyone they need to work this way. I think the big problem is that his tone of voice implies that this is the best possible way for everybody, and that everybody should aim to be this way, which can be true for many people. And in fact, for many people, they've never felt what it's like to push themselves. They've never felt what it's like to work 14, 12, 16 hours in a day on one thing, to fucking go to sleep because you have to, and then wake back up and immediately rail right back into what you were doing. That's a feeling a lot of people don't have. But at the same time, that is not the way you want to work 24/7, 365 if your intention is maximum output. Even if your intention is maximum output without consideration to any other factors of your life. Which, of course, for Hormozi, he's very clear in saying he doesn't care about any other aspects of his life. He only cares about pushing himself to his limits, in his case, through business. Somebody is mowing the lawn out there. I hope that's not fucking me up too bad. Whatever. Okay. So what should you do? First of all, I'll talk a little bit about how I figured out what the answer was for myself. And basically, what I'm trying to get at, and what I'll kind of just funnel into here, is that you'll know exactly which one you are, and you should experiment. Bottom line, you need to have tried a bit of everything. And for myself, like I said, I've worked a little bit with super, Jocko, David Goggins, super grind set of knowing that you don't want to do something, and then going ahead and just doing it anyways, and doing that repeatedly over and over again without trying to optimize for wanting to do it in the first place. And then there's the other end, and of course this exists on a spectrum. If the David Goggins is over here, the Alex Hormozi is over here, and the other way is over here, there's a whole array of options in there. It's not one or the other. I probably lean somewhere, if this is the midway point, I'm probably a bit over here, towards the efficiency side. And people like Tim Ferriss are as well. Essentially, I hate the feeling of doing work and not getting as much out of it as I could. I genuinely feel wasted time fairly badly, and I have a very wide array of interests that stop me from just pouring all time mindlessly into one pursuit, which I think is the reason why I lean a lot more towards being hyper efficient with my work. I will skate by with the bare minimum, but I will set the goalposts extremely high. That way, the intersection of the actual outcome, like the meta outcome long term, is very, very high. But the threshold of efficiency that's required to meet it is brutally high as well. Because if you have, let's say, and this is low, 40 hours a week to work on something, for example, build your business from fucking scratch as a 19-year-old, and you have the goal of, let's say, being a millionaire by 25 or 26 years old. It's like, okay, let's see it, right? Like, are you going to do it with raw input, which is absolutely a valid way, working 80, 90, 100 fucking hours a week, which is real? Or are you going to do it by spending a lot of bandwidth and energy to cut down on the time aspect? But believe it, there's a trade-off. You're going to increase the mental strain you need. You're going to have to experiment a lot more. You're going to